I am not finished with Muffins yet. As mentioned in my last video, I will do another video, but only this time I'll be ranking the side stories, since all I did was rank every single main story. Except for Prison Break, which I'll discuss about that later. Originally, I was not going to do I rank every side story video because that took way too long for me to make. It was tiresome to just read every main story chapter individually, only for me to learn far too late in editing that Prison Break was in fact a main story and not a side story. Even though I swear to the high heavens that I swore that Prison Break was in fact a side story and the people who run the Wikipedia was gaslighting me. So I went back to reitanna's channel and turns out I was right. Prison Break is in fact a side story, not a main story. So yeah, I was beating myself up for no reason, and I think the wiki creators should apologize to me for gaslighting me into thinking that the story was a main story. Nah, I'm just kidding, we all make mistakes. Anyhow, before I begin ranking the side stories and hopefully be done with Muffins forever, I'll need to discuss the rules, just as I will not be ranking main chapters, obviously. I'll also not be ranking the bad musings stories because they are basically just reitanna's fence, but of course in the theme of Oida and being told by her OC Inky Pie, and I don't feel comfortable with reading those or ranking them, so out of respect they'll be excluded. And I'm also only ranking stories made by reitanna, which means sadly Bubbles will be excluded because that story is not made by Ray. It was created by an anonymous person. Oh, and I want to mention that if you're curious about what Muffins is, you'll need to watch either my first tier list video about Muffins or the criticism video I did for the series, because I am not going to explain again because I already did on those videos, and explaining it every time is becoming tiresome. And with that out of the way, let's begin. The first side story I'll be adding to this chart is Derpy's story. Derpy's story is told in the point of view of Derpy Hooves, which is nice. She basically talks about her life just as how she used to live in a house provided by a doctor outside of Ponyville, which don't worry, I'll talk about the doctors later. As well as her life as a filly when she was a child. Her mother abandoned her in the forest by distracting her by teaching her how to blow bubbles, which is how she got her cutie mark. I know, that's just sad and heartbreaking. When Derpy realized her mother was gone, she started crying for her before walking out of the forest until she eventually arrived at Ponyville. Derpy tried to fly but ended up hurting herself, and she ended up being taken to the Ponyville hospital by some ponies who had witnessed her getting injured. But of course, she's an orphan, so they taken her to another doctor so she could live with special ponies who are, in the doctor's own words, just like her. I think reitanna was trying to imply that Derpy ended up in a housing unit for people or horses with disabilities, or I think she was implying that she ended up in a mental hospital, but I have no idea. I'm just gonna guess it's door number 1. Derpy discussed about when she was old enough, they helped her move into a house far from Ponyville. For some reason, I don't know why they chose to give her a house away from Ponyville, because it's obvious that Derpy Hooves can't fly really well and that she has some kind of disability. So wouldn't it make sense if the doctor's given her a more accessible house? You know, a house near the store, so traveling could be much easier for her. Anyways, Pinkie Pie, after befriending Derpy Hooves, personally went to see her house and she was not happy. So she told Derpy Hooves to come live with her in Sugar Cube Corner, which she did, and that is where she remains to this day. And the chapter ends with Derpy talking about how her and Pinkie are each going to bake a pony into muffins. But yeah, overall it's a sweet story, but also sad too, considering that in the chapter, Derpy talks about being abandoned, as well as the fact that the doctors, who are horrible in my opinion, given her a house far from Ponyville. So I'll just put this chapter in the A tier. And now, next is why I like to describe this chapter as the prequel to both Cupcakes and Muffins, that being Pinkie Pie's success.
Smoke weed every day.
And this chapter takes place a week after Pinkie got her cutie mark and threw her first ever party for her Amish parents and siblings. So Pinkie baked her first cupcakes to share to her sisters, and unfortunately they decided to do a tier list and put the cupcakes down on the F tier. Pinkie, of course, wanted the cupcakes to be great, so she decided to check the cupboards for a different ingredient to add to her cupcakes, but accidentally cut her hoof on the cheese grater, and after licking the blood off her wound, she realized that her blood tastes good. So good in fact that when she added it to the cupcakes taste great. And you can see where this is going and leading up to. This is a prequel to both stories after all. Then we cut to show Pinkie's sisters eating her newly baked cupcakes, and Inky asks her what she did differently, which Pinkie Pie says is a secret ingredient.
What could it be?
Spoiler alert is pony meat. Basically, Pinkie Pie ended up visiting a small village with one of her failed batch of cupcakes. The reason she chose to visit the village is to obviously kill a pony, and she added a secret ingredient to her failed batch of cakes: sleeping powder. How did Pinkie got the sleeping powder? It never gets explained in the story. So Pinkie ended up meeting a filly named Raincloud, who she followed her far away from the village. So let me just say this. In the Muffins series, cutie marks work differently. Reitanna have mentioned somewhere that marks represent the pony's destiny, just as, for example, Inky Pie's lock cutie mark represents that her destiny was to remain locked up inside her mind, and Apple Bloom's mark represents that her destiny was to be a baker murder ponies. So I assume that Raincloud got her cutie mark due to being bullied a lot at home by her brother, as well as crying a lot too. So did this mean her mark represents that her destiny is to just be sad forever? That's just fucking sad. Anyhow, Raincloud eats her shrugged cupcake and ended up passing out, which Pinkie Pie takes her back to her parents' shed, where she dissects Raincloud until she had died and remove her mark as a keepsake before dumping her body in the lava pit. Reitanna Seishin also described on her DeviantArt page for Raincloud that Pinkie Pie basically mercy killed her, which just makes it even sadder. Then the story implies that Pinkie Pie had been baking for a while by herself until her sister walked into the shed for some reason and found that she was in the middle of dissecting a pony, and for whatever reason, instead of being scared or alert her parents of the fact that their little sister is murdering ponies and making them into cupcakes, they wanted to join, and one of the sisters even suggested that they could use the cave as their workstation. And not only that, they could torture the pony before killing them and baking their meat into cupcakes. And so yeah, they ended up doing that together until Pinkie Pie decided to leave Rock Country by herself to spread her smiles and cheer in Ponyville. But of course, Inky and Blinky still continues to bake cupcakes just without the younger sister. But yeah, that's Pinkie's success, and overall, I don't really like the story because it never explained things, just as why did Pinkie's blood taste good? Or even where the hell did she got sleeping powder from? And another thing, how was she able to drag Raincloud's unconscious body into the shed without being caught? The same with dragging her dead body to a lava pit. So I'm just gonna move this chapter to the D tier. Disappointing, but we're not done with the side stories yet. Not at all. Up next is Prison Break. You know, the one that I thought I left out in my ranking every main story video, only for me to learn that it's actually a side story and that the people who made the wiki made a small oopsie. Yeah. So Prison Break takes place after the bakers, minus Derpy and Apple Bloom, because those two were hiding thanks to Inky Pie, got arrested. Derpy Hooves is rightfully upset due to the fact that her friends were captured and appear being alone once again. Apple Bloom tries to console her, as well as coming up with the idea of asking for help from Babs Seed. So the two ponies travel to Manhattan, but first they put on some disguises so they would not be recognized. Also, I find it understandable and funny that they had to also cover their cutie marks, because cutie marks in a way kinda like those number plates you see on the back of cars. Anyways, they arrive at Manhattan and Apple Bloom was able to find the apartments that Babs Seed lives in with her older sister Shazzy. I can only assume that she only knows because I guess she and her family visited them long ago or something, but for some reason Apple Bloom has to ask the receptionist where Babs C lives, which I'm guessing so that she doesn't look suspicious. But then again, I said this before in my Muffins criticism video that receptionists don't even exist in some apartment buildings, but whatever, shameless plug aside. Apple Bloom and Derpy Hooves goes to Babs' apartment and they manage to trick Shazzy by claiming that they're Babs' pen pals. And Shaz lets the girls in without a second thought, or even turning to ask her little sister if she knew Dilly Pad and Abby Rose. So Apple Bloom and Derpy Hooves head to Babs' C's room to reveal who they are and talk to her. Apple Bloom explains her entire story on how she joined the Bakers, how Derpy joined the Bakers, the fact that she murdered her own sister Applejack as well as earned her mark for doing so, and then we finally get to present day after they told about how they had to apprehend Rarity, Twilight and Fluttershy before Fluttershy escaped and let the police ponies. I'm so sorry to pause here, but I find it wild that Apple Bloom went to Babs C. Like, her reasoning on why she chose to go to Babs is because Babs C is clever and gutsy as well as being her cousin, but there's this huge risk there that Apple should know, which is what if Babs C chose to knock her into the police? My only assumption, and this is a dark thought, is that Apple Bloom has a backup plan, and it's called murder.
Babs Seed.
So Apple Bloom asks Babs Seed if she could help bust the Pie sisters out of prison, which she accepts, but only if she could join the team, which Apple Bloom and Derpy Hooves let her on board before leaving the apartment after discussing when or how Babs was going to meet them in Ponyville. Then we are cut to 5 days later and Babs Seed lies to her sister by telling her that Big Macintosh wants her to go visit Sweet Apple Acres because Granny Smith is sick, as well as mention that Apple Bloom as well as 5 other ponies are behind the murders. The next day, Babs Seed arrive at Ponyville and after visiting Big Macintosh to drop off of her bags, she goes to see Apple Bloom and Derpy Hooves, who are hiding in the bakery. Apple Bloom lets Babs know that Pinkie and her sisters were in death row, and for some reason Babs is shocked and surprised about that. Like, girl, they murdered and cannibalized a lot of ponies. Anyhow, a week goes by and Babs Seed was able to visit the prison, and somehow was able to convince the police ponies to let her talk to all 4 of the Pie sisters. Again, somehow. I'm shocked that the prison guard did not tell her that she can't visit without a grown-up or something. He just lets her talk to the Pie sisters, but she was able to gather some info about their status in the prison before leaving so she could tell Derpy and Apple Bloom. And I'm just going to give a TLDR. They were able to bust the Pie sisters out of prison. Yes, 2 fillies and a handicapped pegasus were able to bust the Pie sisters out of jail. So I'm just going to put this down on the F tier. Next chapter is the Party Pony, which is the chapter where Derpy Hooves becomes best friends with Pinkie Pie and Apple Bloom. Also, I kinda hate this chapter because of the fact that the store clerk is just unnecessary rude towards Derpy for simply not having enough bit, which is the currency in the MLP universe, to buy some apple. Bitch. Then Applejack came along to help Derpy out by offering some apples for free from her farm. Then every pony, except Pinkie Pie and Apple Bloom, talk slowly and use simple words at Derpy, which pisses me off to no end. After all that, we learn a bit more about Derpy Hooves, such as the fact that she used to have a job as a mailman, but she was fired after she accidentally dropped some of the letters into a lake below when she was flying. Then Derpy decides to visit Pinkie Pie at the bakery, where she lives, and basically this part is just a repeat of the beginning of the third story of Muffins, but in the POV of Derpy Hooves. Derpy was also the one who suggested that they should add a coloured dot on each number so that they know if they are going to torture and murder a unicorn, pegasus or earth pony, as well as another dot to tell which one's a foal, stallion or mare. The chapter then ends with Dr. Hooves being picked on the list and Derpy being furious that he shares her last name, even though his name is spelled W-H-O-O-V-E-S while hers is H-O-O-V-E-S. But I don't really like this chapter, mostly because of the ableism is slightly shown in it, and I absolutely hate the vendor yelling at Derpy Hooves like that. I do like the fact that in one scene, Rainbow called Derpy Desc before being corrected that her name is in fact Derpy, because it's a nice callback to the fact that Lauren originally was going to assign Derpy Hooves the name Desc do before the internet got a hold of her. I want to rank this story a D, but I just can't stand the ableism, so I'm going to be giving it an F right next to Prison Break. Alright, so far I have given 3 chapters on low rankings, so let's hope that the next chapter will get a high ranking. That chapter being, yep, this one is not going to get a higher ranking. Party of None begins with showing us a flashback of Pinkie Pie as a filly. Arriving at Ponyville, making Pony smile by saying hi to them. She then came across Sugar Cube Corner and ends up walking inside where she greets the cakes. During their conversation, the cakes has to run back into the kitchen when Mrs. Cake realizes that she had forgotten about her cupcakes which were being baked in the oven. 2 customers enter the bakery to buy a cupcake and they were about to leave when they realized that the cakes weren't there, so Pinkie Pie quickly ran to the cash register to serve the ponies for them. The cakes arrived back into the room, and being impressed with how Pinkie Pie helped serve the customers when they were away, as well as giving them good customer service, they decide to let Pinkie Pie live with them, which Pinkie Pie accepts. Then we are cut to a scene that is taking place where Pinkie is a teenager, and she's basically depressed because she never got the chance to bake her special cupcakes. Yeah, no, the ones that have pony meat in them. She left the bakery at Ponyville to take out her anger in the Everfree Forest, just as fucking killing an innocent bunny. What the hell? As well as stomping on a few snails, and managing to tear a snake into pieces, which is honestly pretty fucking badass, like holy shit, Pinkie Pie. And then Pinkie Pie finds herself at a cliff where she thinks about committing Ash holding Pikachu in a bathtub, and so she does. Actually, no, she didn't. The reason she did it is because she thought about her sisters Inky and Blinky, as well as thought about how they would feel if they found out that Pinkie Pie was gone, dead, deleted from the world like one of my Minecraft save files. Then Pinkie Pie started venturing out of the forest until she comes across the castle that Luna's and Celestia used to reside in, and inside the castle she found booby traps, as well as devices made for torture, which I don't know why Luna and Celestia will have these things back then, but then again, a lot of crazy and nonsensical things happen in Muffins, like ask my good old friend Applebloom, who once performed a blood transfusion by using Silver Spoon's blood to save Pinkie Pie despite her being a child. Or the fact that one of the Pie sisters somehow knew how to rig up helmets that can monitor how much pain Luna's reading bell had taken. The chapter ends with Pinkie Pie building her basement under the bakery, as well as going to help Applejack babysit Applebloom, who would later become her pupil. Yeah, can you see why I don't really like this story? So I'm just ranking this an F. Next is The Revenge of Obsidian Pie, a story about Pinkie Pie getting her revenge on her parents, Cloudy Court and India's Rock. The chapter starts with the 3 sisters resting in their torture cave, huddling to keep warm. The Rock country is currently experiencing the worst downpours it ever had. Then Pinkie wakes up and tells her sisters that she wants to bake cupcakes, which one of them was like, dude, it's raining, no one is going to be outside. But Pinkie wasn't talking about baking some random pony into cupcakes. Oh no. She tells her sister that she wants to quote-unquote say hello to her mum and dad. And TLDR, Pinkie Pie, Inky Pie, and Blinky Pie ended up kidnapping their parents and taking them back to the torture cave. However, Pinkie Pie ends up killing India's Rock by smashing his head in with both of her hooves. The reasoning for this was because her dad was less responsible for her misery than her mother was, so they focus on torturing Cloudy Quartz. Also, I'll be adding a trigger warning for trypophobia here, so if you're easily triggered by mentions of holes in skin as well as holes with things in them, skip to this timestamp on the screen now. So Pinkie Pie ate a piece of her mother's meat and described it as bitter. So the sisters suggest that they could cut holes into Cloudy's skin with a device that the sisters had made, as well as put each sugar cube into the hole, because the idea was the muscle would dissolve the sugar and hopefully go through Cloudy's bloodstream. Unsurprisingly, Cloudy Quartz freaked out at the sight of the holes, and Pinkie, when she and her sisters were like that Cloudy was afraid of the holes in her skin, she got an idea and they ended up playing their mother while she was still alive. The sugar cubes are almost dissolved, so they are almost ready to harvest their blood off. But Pinkie Pie still isn't satisfied, feeling that Cloudy Quartz haven't suffered enough, so Inky suggests that they make her mother eat their dad. then when she ate enough of him, it was time to harvest. Inky Pie took the lead of cutting open Cloudy and removed her organs. She then kills Cloudy by crushing her ribs and lungs, which instantly murders her. The girls then bake some cupcakes. They ate some as well as sell the others to the ponies in the village's market. When they got home, Minky, Blinky and Inky realised there's one cupcake left. At first, one of them suggests that they divide it. Then Inky Pie said that it's about time that they go visit Pinkie Pie and join her in Ponyville. Then the story ends with them packing up for the long trip. I kind of like this chapter, mostly because the fact that one of my least favourite characters in the Muffins series, Cloudy, was murdered and tortured, despite the story being a torture corn chapter. I would rate this story an A, but I'm going to rank it a B instead. Okay, the next chapter is Just a Little Girl Time, and then we have a couple of chapters that are non-murder and torture corn related. Except for Inky's Stellar Obsession, Broken Tiara, and Silence and Silver. Those three will be torture and murder related, unfortunately, but So in Just a Little Girl Time, the bakers and the remaining members of the main six, Twilight, Sparkle, Rarity, and Fluttershy, decide to have some girl time, which involves putting on makeup, trying out jewelry, dresses, and just generally having fun together. I honestly love this chapter, and it almost makes you forget that Pinkie and the other bakers are in fact carnival serial killers who had murdered a bunch of ponies, including the rest of the main six's friends. That is, if you ignore the ending where it's revealed that Inky Pie has a pretty messed up scrapbook, as well as the fact that they also briefly discuss the recent disappearance of the other ponies. But regardless, I'm gonna just put this chapter on the S tier. Now, we finally get to my favourite chapter, Free Like a Pegasus. I briefly spoke about how I loved this chapter in my last tier list video, but now I get to discuss it. The story begins with Derpy waking up Inky Pie by shaking her awake. Minky wakes up and asks Derpy where her sisters were. Derpy explained that Pinkie Pie was hanging out with her other friends, while Inky and Blinky ran out to explore the Everfree Forest to check out the castle. Blinky and Inky chose to leave Derpy Hooves and Inky Pie behind because the forest is dangerous and they didn't want Derpy to get hurt. So they basically dumped her with Inky Pie so that she has some company. Maybe dump isn't the right word. After Derpy helped brush Inky Pie's hair, the girls decide to go outside to take photos together, and then they later went flying. Derpy Hooves had Inky Pie riding her back. At first she was scared, but Derpy reassured her that she shouldn't be scared of something that won't hurt her, which would be reassuring if it weren't for the fact that they were flying really high, and if Minky slipped off, those words would mean nothing. But after their fun, they returned back to the bakery to be greeted by Pinkie and her sisters, and that was Free Like a Pegasus. You can kind of see why I absolutely love this story, and the fact they shipped Derpy and Minky together regardless of what reitanna said about their sexualities. I also love the fact that these two keep an eye on each other and comfort each other too, just as Inky Pie reassuring Derpy Hooves that the spider she was scared of is harmless, as well as Derpy Hooves reassuring Minky that she shouldn't be scared of heights. This whole chapter is chip material, regardless of the fact that reitanna says that they're both asexual and therefore they, and I quote, couldn't date any pony, despite the fact that being asexual doesn't mean you couldn't date anyone. Asexuality, please correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, means that you don't have any sexual attraction for anyone. It does not mean you don't have any attraction to the person, and it also most definitely does not mean you couldn't date anyone either. It just means you don't want to do with that person. But yeah, I'm putting this chapter in the S tier just because I'm a huge Bubble Walk shipper. Now, those are two really nice stories, correct? Unfortunately, the tone of this video is going to take a shift as we take a look at the Imprisoned Pie, which, if you couldn't guess by the title and image I show on the screen, this story is focused on how Inky Pie ended up imprisoned by her own parent. The story starts with little Inky Pie waking up to find itself in the family cellar, which her mother used to store homemade jams. So Minky makes her way up to the stairs to the cellar door, only to find that it's locked and she couldn't get out. So Minky tried desperately to bang on the door and call out for her parents, who seemed to not have heard her. So she decided that she'll wait until morning before trying again. Then we get put into a flashback scene where Minky decides to sneak into her baby sister's room. Inky Pie, for context, Mickey's parents told their firstborn child that she isn't allowed to go anywhere near Inky Pie because they believe that Inky Pie would hurt or kill their foal because these parents are religious and they have some, let's say, backwards beliefs. So yeah, she sneaks into her baby sister's nursery when the foal was asleep in her crib. Inky wakes up and gets to meet Pinkie for the first time, and sadly also the last time. She plays with Inky for a bit, which includes blowing raspberries on her belly, and when the little foal squealed with laughter, Cloudy Quartz quickly stormed in and took the baby away from her before putting Inky back in her crib, ignoring her crying and the fact that Inky Pie was trying to explain to her mother that she was only playing with her. Cloudy ignores them both and even slapped Inky Pie in the face before telling her to leave the room. Jesus, what a bitch. Can you guys see why I was so happy that Cloudy was killed? Then Inky Pie was eating dinner with her parents before falling unconscious, because it's implied that her parents had shrugged her food, probably with the same sleeping powder that Pinkie Pie used on Rain long ago. I'm gonna just assume that one of her parents suffered from insomnia or some kind of sleep problem. Then we are cut to present day where Inky Pie woke up to the sound of her parents' commotion from outside of the cellar. Cloudy opens the cellar door and demands her daughter to go all the way down at the bottom of the stairs. Then Cloudy starts to monologue about how much of an evil child Inky Pie is, and mentioned how difficult carrying Pinkie when she was a baby in her mother's womb was a pain. Then when she had Inky Pie, she was worried that the same thing will happen, but to her shock, Inky was calm and she only got sick once. Cloudy had to go to the doctor to make sure that Inky Pie was in fact alive and not a stillborn, and she was amazed that the child is in fact alive and not dead. Then, after giving birth to her second daughter, this is where her and her husband decide that Inky Pie must have been sent by the devil. Thanks, I hate them. It's obvious that Cloudy and Igneous are so religious that they don't understand that it's normal for Inky Pie during her time in her mother's room to kick a lot, and for Cloudy to get sick a lot too. Not all pregnancies are the same, as absolutely does not mean that it's a sign that Pinkie is Satan's hellspawn. If you ignore the fact that she ends up growing up to murdering and torturing ponies and making them into cupcakes, that is. Cloudy tells Inky Pie that her and her husband wanted to get rid of her, but Igneous Rock said that they would end up in hell if they kill her. So they decide to just lock her up in the cellar, and that if she ends up dying in the cellar, then they won't end up in hell because apparently it won't be their fault, even though they were the ones who locked her up in the cellar in the first place. Pinkie, who is rightfully heartbroken and overcome with rage, tried to attack her mother, but Cloudy Quartz just bucked her down the cellar before quickly leaving and locking the door. They do end up later supplying Inky Pie with a blanket, some food and water now and then, as well as a bucket to use as the bathroom. I don't know why they didn't just leave her to starve to death, but then again they probably count that as being their fault and ending up in hell if she starves to death. But that does not make sense because Cloudy earlier said that if Inky Pie dies in the cellar, then it would not be their fault. So which one is it? But again, they are Amish and malicious people tend to not make sense at all. Inky Pie then ended up getting her cutie mark, which is a black lock. Oh, and I should mention that Inky Pie started killing and eating rodents that ended up in the cellar. But yeah, that's the imprisoned pie. It's honestly a wild chapter in my opinion. Just as the fact that her parents are so malicious that they assume that Inky Pie acting out and her mother being pregnant with Pinkie is the sign that she was sent from hell. That is the most shittiest of reasons why they chose to lock their first child in the cellar. I'm just gonna put this story in the F tier. Okay, we have 10 chapters to go and I'll be finally finished with looking at the side stories and including them on the tier list. The next chapter I'll be taking a look at, and in my opinion it's the most stupidest and unrealistic chapter I had ever read, and I'm not alone, that being On Trial. I don't think this story should be called On Trial. It honestly should be called Pinkie and her sisters throw shade at the princesses, because this entire story is literally just Inky Pie and her sisters arguing with the princesses, mostly aiming at Celestia. It's just the Pie sisters trying to guilt trip the princesses and the court into thinking that this wouldn't have happened if they actually did something. Like, what the hell was Princess Princess Celestia and Luna were meant to do. Anyways, the chapter ends with the Pie sisters being sentenced to death and the princesses questioning their roles as rulers of Decrecia. And yes, I am going to give this story an F ranking. Damn, we have 5 stories on the F tier now. Hopefully this next story will shake things up. This one being the New Elements of Harmony, which is a story that takes place after Babs, her cousin, and Derpy Hooves had helped bust the Pie sisters out of jail, and are now hanging out in the secret basement. While the ponies were celebrating, Pinkie Pie was focused on making something, blinking comments about the fact that their decorations were confiscated by the police. You know, the skulls, organ balloons, test size, etc., were taken and most likely buried as part of a mass funeral to those who were murdered by the bakers, which includes the taxidermy bodies of Applejack and Rainbow Dash. Then Inky Pie mentions that the group will be turning the abandoned castle that Pinkie Pie found years ago into their new hideout, and not only that, they'll build a passageway that leads up towards said castle. Suddenly Pinkie catches others' attention with the 6 ribbons she had been working on. Each ribbon, mind you, has something attached to it to represent each of the bakers minus her. Pinkie had explained that since the old elements of harmony are gone, or except for her, Twilight and Fluttershy, but Twilight had lost her mind, and Fluttershy is going to be next on the list. So she had decided that as the element of laughter, she would announce that the bakers will become the new elements of harmony, which is pretty ironic considering that the bakers didn't do anything that can be considered a representation of harmony. Apple Bloom becomes the element of determination and was given a ribbon with a plastic apple attached to it. The reasoning for this is because she never gives up on finding her cutie mark. Then Derpy Hooves becomes the element of reliance for being a trustworthy friend to Pinkie Pie and was given a ribbon with a large round blue rhinestone attached to it. Next, Inky Pie was given a ribbon with a purple marble attached to it, and she is announced as the element of guidance for raising and caring for her sisters, including Pinkie. Blinky was given the element of integrity for being the most honest pony and was given a ribbon with a shard of metal attached to it, which was painted gold, obviously to represent her mark. And Babs Seed was given a ribbon with a pumpkin seed stuck to it, and she was given the role as element of bravery for standing up to her bullies and busting the pies out of prison. I so saved Pinkie Pie for last because I could not believe what Pinkie Pie given her. And no, not because Mickey is given the role of element of liberation. I'm talking about her ribbon. On her ribbon is a toy lot.
What's wrong with you?
I get that it's supposed to represent her cutie mark, and everyone else has something on their ribbon that represents their mark and all, but I don't think Mickey needs a reminder of her cutie mark and the fact that she was locked up in a cellar, you know. I think it would have made more sense if Pinkie Pie had tied a key onto the ribbon and then called her the element of liberation. And if you're wondering how Pinkie Pie got that title, she got it from fighting to live and knowing the truth about the world. Then Derpy Hooves asks if this would make Pinkie Pie a princess, but Pinkie rejects the idea of herself becoming a princess until the chapter Sting and the unknown ending chapter that will never be released at all. After the group hug, Inky Pie suggested to Babs that maybe they could somehow make her bullies as part of her first baking project, but Babs revealed that she had already killed her bullies before coming to Ponyville, which I'll talk about that real soon, so wait. So they decide to make Fluttershy Babs' first project, and yeah, that's how the story ends. Honestly, I love the idea of Pinkie Pie giving her baker's elements, even though I think she could have designed Babs and Pinkie Pie's element better, but she was working with whatever she has left. But she could have used something else for Mickey's element though. I say they need a better name than just the New Elements of Harmony. I think it would make a lot more sense if they were called the Elements of Chaos or Disharmony or something similar like that. I would honestly give this chapter an S or even an A tier, but it's going down to B. Alright, so the next chapter is Grudge of a Bad Seed, and this is one of the longest side stories that reitanna Station have ever written, so I'm gonna just try and shorten it down, because otherwise we'll be here all week. So Grudge of a Bad Seed begins with Babs Seed returning back to Manhattan after visiting her cousins. She is greeted by her older sister Shazzy. They arrive at their apartment, and Babs heads to bed after.
dinner.
The next day, she learns from her sister that 3 ponies from Ponyfield had disappeared yesterday. Then she quickly rushed off to catch the bus to school, where she talks to her friend Shane Link, who is the oldest stallion that goes to high school. Once she arrives to school, Babs Seed heads to her classroom, where she is already being picked on by 3 of her bullies: Short Fuse, Red Chase the Bot, and Rouge. They basically pick on Babs for being a blank flake. They even laugh at her when she talks about starting her own CMC branch in Manhattan. After the day of school, she heads to the park, and no surprise, her bullies were there. Babs Seed at first tried to befriend them, but they ended up just laughing at her, as well as beat Babs Seed up and rip her cape apart. But before things can get ugly, Shane's Link comes out of nowhere and saves her. After they chat about what happened, Babs shares one of her apples that she was given by her cousin Applejack. Shane mentions that Manhattan doesn't have an apple farm and that most of their produce were imported. Babs Seed decided that they could change that by planting an apple seed in the ground, and that's when her mark appears, and she runs off to tell her sister, as well as told her how she was being bullied. The next day, Babs Seed returned to school, where she meets her bullies again. They are shocked that Babs Seed has a Q mark. However, that doesn't stop them from bullying her, because during recess, Short Fuse tells Babs that she is still a loser, cutie mark or no cutie mark. Then her and her bullies got into a fight. The bullies started beating her up, basically trying to kill her. Like hell, Grudge was able to do fire magic with her horn, but before she could fucking burn Babs Seed, a teacher stepped in and orders the 3 bullies to head to the principal office to be suspended. Babs Seed ended up running off to her apartment before school could even end, which is where she pulls out her book, which contains a knife that she uses to, I can't really say that word because I don't want to get flagged, so I'm just gonna call it slicing seeds. So she used the knife to cut her own seeds. Babs then heads straight to bed wearing a hoodie, and Red Jazz Seed returned home. Babs lied to her saying that she is sick and that is why she is home so early. Weeks go past, Shane came to visit her after noticing that Babs had been rode the bus for a while, and he also worried that whatever was happening in Ponyfield came to Manhattan as well. He even told Babs Seed this once he arrived at her apartment, and he also learned cutting her own apple seeds as well, as the fact that the bullies almost killed her. She then tells her sister this, well, except for the fact that she cut her own apple seeds, and Shaz basically told her that she should fight back. So Shane takes her to the park to teach her how to fight, as well as some tips too. The next day, Babs arrived back to school where, at recess, the bullies were tormenting her classmates. So Babs ended up getting into a fight and ends up winning it. However, she was suspended from school, and when she arrived home to tell her story, she proceeded to ask to talk to Shane Link on the balcony, where she mentioned she had the urge to murder one of the bullies, which scares Shane, and he tried to convince her that she is good to do that sort of thing. Babs then later visits Short Fuse at the hospital after learning from one of her new friends on what happened to the bullies after the fight. She went to the hospital to basically torment Short Fuse mentally. Then Babs learned from her sister that Rainbow Dash had disappeared next. She even begged her sister to let her return to Ponyfield so she could check up on her cousin, but she refused because she did not want her little sis to go missing too. During the 5th week, Shane Link finally came to visit Babs Seed, after avoiding her due to being scared of her because of what she had told him. Then after a while, Babs returned to school, and she basically tries to make peace with her bullies, but it doesn't work out, and they absolutely refuse to accept Babs' olive branch. Shane Link, one of her friends, announced to her that him, his parents, and little brother Hyperlink had to move due to Shane's parents fearing that the Ponyfield disappearances will come to Manhattan next due to some Pegasus or Cloudstale going missing as well.
Are you sure about that?
Then she learns that Applejack had disappeared too, and the bullies had started to slowly begin harassing her again. And then we get a repeat of one of the parts from Prison Break, the one where Apple Bloom visited Babs Seed. After they were done talking to her, she had decided to go looking for her 3 bullies, with the intention to kill them. Basically, she tricked the bullies into consuming some crushed up apple seeds and juice, claiming that it's a new underground drug called Dirt. Of course, if you know, apple seeds have cyanide in them, and if you consume too much of these seeds, you can get poisoned, which is what happened to the bullies. And Babs Seed just got away with murder. And basically the chapter ends with Babs Seed luring Fluttershy to her doom. So yeah, that was Grudge with a bad seed. So I'm going to rank in the C tier. Alright, up next is Broken Tiara. So this chapter takes place when Babs Seed boards the train to leave Ponyfield, and Apple Bloom, her sister, Scootaloo, and Sweetie Belle were saying bye to her. Applejack ends up heading back to the farm. As soon as Applejack leaves, Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon stood out in the mud puddle to tease the Cuba Crusaders. But this isn't some ordinary teasing. Diamond Tiara decided to turn around and bring up Apple Bloom's and Applejack's dead parents, who died when Apple Bloom was only a baby. So likewise, she snaps and runs off to Pinkie Pie crying. And Pinkie, being the good friend, she was trying to cheer her up. But it doesn't work. In fact, the little filly took the jar of numbers that they used to pick which pony would be next, and threw it to the ground, much to Pinkie's shock. Apple Bloom shows her mentor Diamond Tiara's number and said that she wants to kill her despite the rules. Inky Pie tries to tell Apple Bloom that she had already picked 2 ponies, but after some persuading and Apple Bloom shouting at her, Inky Pie leaves to get the 3 ponies while Apple Bloom stays behind to set up. Under the pretense of taste testing food, Pinkie invites over Cocoa Bean, Glitter and Diamond Tiara. Diamond of course decides to act like a brat, saying that she is way too classy to eat sweets. So instead Pinkie had her to taste test some tea, while the 2 other ponies try some cupcakes, and no surprise there's sleepy powder in them. Diamond Tiara rakes to the sound of Glitter screaming because of her horn being shattered to pieces. Inky Pie hop into view and take the girl's mouth shut. Apple Bloom also refills herself and explains their cupcake recipe, as well as toying with the other ponies during the process. Diamond Tiara, being scared for her life, tries to tell her sob story on why she became a bully. Diamond also tries to apologize to Apple Bloom and pleads for her to let her go, but instead of that, Apple Bloom begins to remove her cutie marks, as well as starting to torture her, such as removing her jaw and tongue, beating her senseless, and when she spat out the phrase "life's a party," this gave Inky Pie inspiration to use that phrase for her party banner. So she took a paintbrush and uses Diamond Tiara's blood to paint the banner. Apple Bloom was just about to hit her, but decided to let her write a message on some piece of paper. After Diamond was done, it reads, "Don't hurt Silver Spoon." Apple Bloom was surprised and impressed that Diamond Tiara would actually care for some pony than herself, but she tells her that Silver has a number, and she won't just not hurt her. Apple Bloom decides to finish up quickly, so she injects her bully with a syringe to numb the pain before proceeding to cut her open and starting to remove her organs into a bucket while talking about how horrible Tiara was to her friends, as well to Silver Spoon. Pinkie notices that her student is crying, but she tells Inky Pie that she doesn't know if it's because she's happy that Diamond Tiara is finally gone, or shocked at the fact that she just single-handedly murdered a pony on her own, which her mentor tells her that it could be both. And the 2 girls start focusing all of their attention on Cocoa Bean and Glitter. And yeah, that's how the chapter ends. Still gonna put this story on the F tier because I just don't like it, and it's just a torture core chapter but focused on Apple Bloom. Next chapter is Inky Pie's birthday, which is a nice little break for the torture core chapters. Until you realise that Inky's Stellar Obsession is up next. In this story, Inky, Blinky, and Minky were carrying a huge bag of fruit back to the bakery. When they arrived back home, however, it was dark and quiet. At first, the sisters thought it's because there was a playdate today, but when they checked Inky Pie's room, it turns out to be a surprise party for Inky because it was her birthday today, which Inky Pie forgot and then told Inky Pie that when she had left, their mum and dad had decided to forbid birthday parties, and basically everything that relates to a birthday party. Pinkie then asks Inky Pie when was her birthday, which Minky is confused and asks what a birthday was, because, you know, she was locked in the cellar for such a long time that she doesn't know what birthdays or birthday parties are, as well as forgotten her own birthday too. So they decided to give Minky a birthday. Inky Pie chooses for her birthday to be in autumn, and Apple Bloom suggested that she could share her birthday on the same day as hers.
There can be only one!
Then the girls proceed to celebrate Inky's birthday, and that's how the chapter ends. I really like this one, so I'm going to put it on the A tier next to Derpy's story. Now, we're moving on to the next chapter, Inky's Stellar Obsession, which all I can describe this chapter as is reitanna's revenge story. The reason I call it that is because it's basically Inky Pie brutally torturing Stella Burst to death, and Stella is basically reitanna Seishin's ex-friend Zosie that she had made for them, and then later took back because she and her friend had a falling out. I've just gotta give a quick TLDR about this chapter. Basically, Inky Pie sees Stella Burst and falls in love with her. However, she doesn't want to date Stella, she wants to kill Stella. So, after introducing herself to the mayor, she manages to convince her to come back to Sugar Cube Corner, where they also learn that the cakes and their bowls have fled Ponyfield due to the fear that them or their kids will end up disappearing next. Inky shrugs Stella with some spiked carrot juice, and her and Blinky proceeded to torture her by skinning her alive and wrapping her up with galls. However, it doesn't go well when they need to shoot her up with another syringe just to keep her alive and not go into shock, because the next shoot up ends up killing her brain just as starting to foam at the mouth when the other bakers return. Mickey waved her hoof at Stella's eyes, and her eyes just remained unfocused. And after a while, Inky Pie ends up turning Stella's fur into a saddled bag. This chapter will be also going into the F tier, not just because it's a torture corn story, but because the fact that reitanna killed off her ex-friend Sosie out of spite. And I don't care what she says, Stella is not her OC, it's her ex-friends. Next chapter is another Inky Pie focused story, and that being Even Rocks Break, which takes place after Pinkie Pie left for Ponyville, being that the Pie sisters' parents are back to being just plain old horrible. It begins with Blinky Pie secretly playing with a pet lizard named Peppo, which her parents have forbade her from keeping it. Unfortunately for Blinky, Cloudy Quartz caught her playing with the pet lizard, and she stomps on it to death until it was nothing but a bloody stain on the ground. Devastated, Blinky yelled at her mother, who was about to hit her, but Inky got in the way of her, and before pretending to take Cloudy's side. And once she was gone, she comforts her younger sister and tells her that she bottles up her anger that she had for her parents. The next day, the two sisters decide to kidnap, torture, and kill a pony. And after they were done, the two bakers decide to leave some cupcakes for their parents before selling the rest in the village. Then the girls come across a, yeah, I couldn't say that word, and they ended up buying a record player, as well as records from her. They were able to get it cheap because the seller was having issues selling her stuff because the other ponies does not approve of her for having a different lifestyle than them. Amish, am I right? So the ponies took the record player and records back home, planning on playing with it tomorrow. Inky and Blinky went downstairs for dinner, which one of the sisters asked their parents if they enjoyed the cupcakes. Of course, Cloudy tells them that they threw the cupcakes out without taking a single bite of the sweet treat, and proceeds to forbade them from consuming pastries, even going so far into calling cupcakes a luxury food, and that it's not a necessity, which screwed them. The next night, the fillies decide to listen to their record player, and dancing along to the music. But then in comes the party shitter, and Cloudy starts smashing their record player to pieces. Inky finally has enough and gets upset and mouthy at Cloudy Quartz, who slaps her in the face. After being hit by her own mother, she runs off and Blinky follows after her. Inky ends up having a meltdown in a cave in front of her sister Blinky Pie. She ends up throwing a rock which breaks open and revealed that inside of it was a Shio. And that's when she received her cue mark, which Blinky Pie concluded that the mark represents that Inky Pie should have been bottling up her feelings and hide who she really is. The chapter ends with Inky standing up to Igneous Rock and promising her sister that someday they'll leave the rock farm. And that's how the story ends. I'm giving this chapter a C. On to the next chapter, which is called
All that glitters is not gold.
All That Glitter starts with the Pie sisters working on the rock farm, and they then spotted their grandmother Granny Pie, or Rosie Quartz, who is Cloudy Quartz's mother, obviously. She had decided to come and stay for a few nights with her daughter, son-in-law, and two grandchildren. She tells Blinky and Inky a story about the mice's treasure while they eat their grandmother's homemade triple chocolate 15-layer marjolaine. She tells a story about how after the mice made some crazy purchases, the church questioned him on where he got all the money, which he admitted to being wealthy, and the church demanded that he give up his wealth, for greed was a sin. Or they were probably just fucking jealous because this guy has more wealth than them and was probably bringing in all the hot mares. When he refused, the town became angry and formed a mob burning down his house. He escaped, however, told them he buried his treasure when no pony will find it unless they were worthy. After hearing the story, Cloudy gets furious and yells at her mother, which Granny Pie lies and claims that the story was just nonsensical ramblings from an old pony. Cloudy then commands her daughters to go to bed without dinner, and later that night, Rosie sneaks into her granddaughter's bedroom to tell them that the story is in fact true, and the two ponies should go looking for that treasure. The next morning, the two sisters follow the map and attempted to climb down the cliffs with a rope. However, the rope breaks and Pinkie falls into the cave. Inky panics and runs off to get her parents and grandmother.
Mom! Mom! Mom!
Pinkie, meanwhile, decides to explore the cave when she ends up finding the miser's treasure, which was gold, and when she ran her hoof over it, that's when she received her cutie mark. Igneous Rock soon rescued Pinkie Pie, who showed her mother, grandmother, and Inky Pie the gold that she found. Cloudy grabs it and throws it away like,
This bitch!
so the ponies leave to patch Pinkie Pie up, all except Rosie Quartz, who'd stay behind. Later that night, she returns into her granddaughter's bedroom to reveal that she had received the gold that Pinkie Pie had found, and she told them to hide it so they could use the gold to be able to travel to Ponyville. This is why I absolutely love Rosie, because holy shit, she is such a great grandmother. But unfortunately, the trip down the cliffs took quite a bit of effort, and Rosie Quartz died in her sleep from the strain. I was absolutely upset when I heard that part in reitanna's narration of the story, and so was Cloudy and her family. But yeah, that was all that glittered, so I'm just gonna give it an S rating. But yeah, that was me putting on the side stories on the tier list, minus my musings. I do hope you enjoyed this video, and please do not take this as me hating Muffins or reitanna seishin. Like, yeah, I disliked what reitanna did in the past and in the present day, and I have mentioned about how I hate some of the chapters of Muffins, but that doesn't mean I hate reitanna and I want her dead or anything. I mostly made this video for fun and to talk about why I don't like some of the side stories. Anyhow, thanks for watching, and don't forget to show your support by either commenting, liking, subscribing, or even support my Ko-Fi account. If you choose to support me on Ko-Fi, you'll gain access to some of my videos early, as well as my uncensored version of some of their videos, or you can buy some of my adoptables I have up for sale too. I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.